So there seems to be this big mystery in the economy right now, which is that the unemployment rate has come down, and yet wages are stagnant, not rising. Why not?
I mean, I would say two things. Unemployment is still actually kind of high by historical standards. We've sort of said, oh, unemployment is down below 6%, but it was below 5% before the crisis. So maybe full employment is in fact below 5%. The other thing is, God, we're kind of puzzled. We haven't had that much job creation. It's been better lately, but unemployment is lower than it sort of should be given the number of jobs we've created. So maybe there are in fact a lot of people who are not looking because they don't think the jobs are available. Maybe people are responding differently to the survey. There's enough wiggle room in all of this stuff for us not to find it too puzzling. And but I'd say look at the wages. If we're anywhere close to full employment, show me the money, and we're not seeing it.
And in part because of the lack of wage
Right.
growth, we have a huge inequality issue that seems to be getting worse all the time. We've now hit a type of inequality we have not seen since the 1920s, if even then. What do we have to do to change that?
Well,
Or first of all, should I ask, is it bad? A lot of people seem to say, no problem.
well, it's a couple of things. The first is, hey, given the size of the pie, if a lot of it's going to the 1 in 1,000 people in the 0.1%, that's going to mean less for everybody else. So sure, in some sense, if given a rate of economic growth, all that inequality means that the typical American is not making that much money. So that's a bad thing. There are some plausible reasons to think that it's bad on other grounds as well. It may decrease stability because people are strapped, they run up more debt than they should. There may be other issues. We think that a lot of the high incomes are coming from activities of dubious social value, a lot of financial wheeling and dealing. So it's certainly the case is quite strong that this is a bad thing. And what's causing it is complicated. We think financialization is an important part of it. Just at this point, the sheer accumulation of wealth. The Piketty story of where people who are wealthy accumulate even more wealth, and that feeds on itself unless you have a lot of taxation of top incomes, which we don't anymore. What you do about it is partly, I think, financial reform. More financial reform would help. Stronger labor bargaining power. Unions. People had lots of complaints, but now that they're gone, we're seeing that the economy doesn't go really where you want it to without them. And taxes. Nothing quite like having strongly progressive taxation, strong inheritance taxes to limit extreme inequality.
And how did we get out of it in the 1930s and 40s? Because the previous peak was 1929, somewhere thereabouts, and by 1940, 45, 50, tremendous equality. And that actually did set off a couple of decades of boom after that. So how did we get out of it before?
Well, partly, again, taxes. Taxes at the top were quite a lot, that went up a lot to levels we would now consider inconceivable, but there they were. And I like to talk about, there was a great Fortune article in 1955 about today's CEOs and how they have to make do with much less than their predecessors, but they work hard all the same, so that worked out okay. No one will believe it now, but in fact it worked out okay. Also, there was a great wave of union organizing from the late 30s on that seems to have been an equalizing force. And during the war, the policies pursued during the war compressed the wage structure, and it stuck. It seems that the FDR managed to establish norms of equality that lasted for a long time without doing any damage to the economy. So another world war might be a way to be more equal, not my suggestion.
And do you think that those are the policies that we have to pursue? Do we have to go to more aggressive taxation on big incomes? Do unions have to come back? Or is there some other way to fix this issue?
Oh, I don't think there's another way to fix the issue. Taxes and increased bargaining power for ordinary workers are hard to think of another way to deal with that. Now, does it have to happen? No. We can become an oligarchic society of extreme inequality and probably persist for a couple of generations that way. That's what happened in the Gilded Age. So, but yeah, if you're looking for some magic way, people used to think, oh, better education, not going to do it. This is not about differing levels of education anymore. This is not about give everybody a college degree and it'll go away. This is something much deeper and something that actually redistributes income, something that changes the bargaining power is the only way to really make a dent in it.
So you were attacked recently by a billionaire, Paul Singer, who say that there's somehow been this massive Krugmanization of the media. What does that mean, first of all?
So what the Krugmanization that he complains about, by the way, I'm delighted, that this is ultimate ambition, right? To become a verb is a great thing. But he was one of the people who signed the infamous, hyperinflation is coming letter to Ben Bernanke in 2010, and Krugmanization is the evil thing of pointing out that all those people actually said that and were wrong and won't admit that they were wrong. So Krugmanization is actually holding people accountable for bad economic predictions. Terrible, terrible thing.
So what those people will still say, and they will say it incredibly vehemently without backing down, it's only a matter of time.
Yes.
It's just a question of early, not wrong.
And Paul Singer actually, talking about inequality and total absence of how do you look to other people, he said, you can see that it's coming because look at the prices of real estate in the Hamptons and of high-end art. I mean, oh my God. But anyway, no, that's right. It is an amazing thing, right? Ben Bernanke showed a little bit of temper, I saw the other day. He's saying, people have been saying that it's coming, and they say, well, wait another 5 years, and it's not coming.
So let's say we wait another 5 years, and let's say we have this continued recovery, never really satisfactory in terms of its power, but unemployment continues to come down. Eventually we get some wage pressure. Are you very confident that Paul Singer is in fact wrong, that it's not early, that it's never?
Oh, nothing is forever. And I guess nothing is forever except red wine on a white couch. No, I mean, if a future Federal Reserve becomes completely derelict in its duty and allows an inflationary boom to develop without doing anything to take away the punch bowl, then of course you can always have inflation. I mean, if you wait long enough, anything will happen. I mean, Argentina has managed to get inflation back after all this time. If you work at it hard enough, you can get there. But the question is there anything in what the Fed has done so far that makes inflation inevitable looking forward? And the answer is no. It's very easy for Janet Yellen to pull away the punch bowl if it becomes necessary. Now, at the moment, there doesn't seem to be any party at all. So it's not clear why she should. But the idea that somehow that quantitative easing that took place in 2011, 2012 is making inflation in the year 2023 a certainty. That's just not right.
So she or the next Fed president can get out from under the $4 trillion balance sheet?
Yeah, because the Fed has multiple tools, and among other things, in a way they prepared for this way back by introducing interest on excess reserves, which is it's a trivial amount now. It's a quarter of a percentage point, but even if they don't have to sell off their portfolio, they don't have to sell it off fast. They don't have to have a fire sale of GSE liabilities or whatever. They all they have to do, if they need a quick restraint on the economy, is raise the interest rate on excess reserves. So they have a whole bunch of tools available, just no problem at all, actually.
So they can effectively let the balance sheet unwind itself over time.
That's right. They might want to start selling stuff off at some point. I think more for political reasons than anything else, they'd like that balance sheet to get smaller. But the idea that there's any technical obstacle to them doing whatever it takes to rein in the boom if we ever get one is just wrong.
So you have had many critics for a long time, which you seem to enjoy. What is it when people your critics keep saying you want to restrict our liberty and our freedom and so forth? Let me just ask you, if you were king and you could draw up the government and taxation for the perfect society, according to you, what would it look like?
Oh, wow. It would look a fair bit, in terms of taxation, it would look a fair bit like the U.S. as it was in the post-war generation,
which is
quite high tax rates. I mean, the best opinion here says that top tax rates really should be something like 70%. I would go there. It's not going to happen, but I would go there.
On what level of income?
Oh, then we're talking really quite high. We're talking about probably income above $1 million a year. So just more steps in the more brackets than we now have. And
same for capital gains? Do you treat them the same, or do you?
I think we should. I think now we didn't do that in the past, but we should, because it turns out that the theoretical case is complicated, but the incentives to game the system that come out of differential taxation are a big problem. So I would do that. But I know there are reasonable people who would disagree with me on that, who would say that you want a lower rate on capital gains. We could finesse that. And then I think the main thing I would say that different from the society we had is we really do need a universal health insurance system. If we're waving away political reality, I'd say let's just have a single payer system. I mean, we've created this complicated thing, which is not working too badly, but it's more complicated than it really needs to be on technical grounds. More poverty aid, not huge amounts, but another couple of percent of GDP would do huge amounts for the welfare of the worst off in our society. But in the end, I'm a free market Keynesian. I believe mostly you want to let markets run the economy. You want taxation that limits incomes at the top and helps people at the bottom. You want a strong safety net, but it's not a very radical vision, or at least it wouldn't have been a radical vision in the political spectrum of 20 years ago.
And is the budget balanced in Paul Krugman world?
Probably, or on average, more or less over the business cycle. Now there's a question, then you get into these whole issues about secular stagnation and do we need some kind of long-term permanent stimulus, but I'm not an advocate of budget deficits always and under all circumstances, only when the economy is depressed. So certainly you certainly want to stabilize the debt GDP ratio, which at the moment would allow you to run some deficit, but not much of one.
Now, a year or two ago, it looked like you and all Keynesians were just 100% right about the recession and what ailed it, and the good response would be stimulus as opposed to austerity. We looked at the UK, it was a complete disaster relative to the United States. Now it seems like the UK is actually doing okay. Not great, but okay, and despite the austerity control. And so
a couple of things about the UK. One is that if you look at the whole track record, it's still awful. Right? They're doing better lately, but it's still awful if you look at the entire arc of it. Another thing is that they actually relaxed the austerity. They were doing more and more tightening of the budget, and then they paused, and that's when the economy started to perk up. And so that's a little bit I've been saying, if you keep on hitting yourself in the head with a baseball bat and you stop, you're going to start to feel better. That doesn't prove that hitting yourself in the head with a baseball bat was a good idea. So there's that. And then they are having something that looks like a renewed housing bubble, which is one of those things that happens. So is the UK a massive pro-austerity example? No. But I think part of the point is that you really want to, this is why we do statistics. This is why we don't say, tell a story about one country and try and fit every twist and turn. It's why you look at what has happened on average to countries that pursued austerity versus countries that didn't, and there the picture is still overwhelmingly clear. It's only because people like to pick and choose their examples that they're taking this UK thing to somehow refute the broader story.
And the field of economics, from the outside, it seems like there are effectively two major schools of thought, and the job of everybody in one of those schools is to defend that school of thought until the end of time and fit the facts and cherry pick and so forth. First of all, how does that happen? Like, do you pick a university to go to and it happens to be one school and then you're in that school forever? Why are there two schools?
Okay. I may be a little too close to this because I was growing up professionally as the division was taking place, and so you really had a sense that there was a kind of a purist, everything must be derived from rational behavior of the individual, and if it can't be derived from that, then it can't happen. There was that drive, and people were deciding which side of that divide am I going to be on. And by the way, it's not a myth that there are the two schools. People have done cluster analysis on citations, and there really are two schools. There is a freshwater and a saltwater school, although it's interesting. Chicago, which is the original freshwater anti-Keynesian place, is actually sliding over. It's becoming, as I like to say, becoming more brackish every year. So Chicago is actually in the process of deserting the school that it founded. And I hope that it's not the case that everybody is just trying to cherry pick to support their point of view. Of course, I would, it seems to me that it's not symmetric. Now you can say I would say that, right? But but it seems to me that the saltwater schools actually have always been more or less trying to understand how it actually works, and have they took on board some of the stuff that the other guys were saying, rejected the stuff they didn't like, and for what it's worth, I feel good about young people in economics. We was having dinner with some people, including some of the bright younger lights in the field, and there really is a sense that the people who are under the age of 35, I'm not sure that I would call that young when I was that age, but anyway, are they're not so invested in defending a camp, that they are in fact looking at the data. And there have even been a few academic papers from people who had been very anti-Keynesian saying, well, actually prices do seem to be sticky and that sort of thing. So maybe it's self-correcting, but God knows we did not enter the financial crisis with the profession we should have entered with.
So you say that to reduce the inequality that's developed, help the economy, we should raise taxes on high incomes, maybe have more unionization. Do you have a problem with people getting super rich? I mean, do you want to restrict how rich some people can get?
That's an interesting thing. My line has always been that I don't have anything against the rich. I just want some of their money to help the people who need help. Now, there is a case to be made which is more almost of a political economy case, that extreme wealth is actually a problem. That there's actually, even aside from the question of whether we'd like to take some of that money and use it to help the poor, whether it distorts the system. And it's interesting. One of the things I didn't know when I read Piketty about my own country, he points out that the argument that extreme wealth is a bad thing in and of itself is a very American argument. That if you go back to the turn of the start of the 20th century, that was something that people said in America, but not in Europe. And the people who said it were not necessarily radicalists. People like Teddy Roosevelt were saying that there is, in fact, if the top 0.01% owns as much wealth as it did then or as it does now, that it actually distorts a democratic society. So there is something to be said. But hostility to wealth is not a big part of the story. And certainly not that I think that people who have $1 billion are necessarily evil, or that it's a bad thing. It's just that mainly that they should be paying higher taxes because how much difference is it going to make to their welfare, right? That they have that extra money versus what you can do with it. And then some concern that great wealth basically undermines democracy.
And what people will say when one talks about that, they'll say, well, everyone gets what they deserve in this country. And if poor people want to be rich, they should work harder. Yeah. Is there anything to that?
Two things. One is there's so much luck involved in great success that I know it's hard for people who've been successful to acknowledge that, but the reality is a lot of it is being in the right place at the right time, preparation, all that. But still, and that goes for everybody. I've had in my own life a successful career, and there are lots of people who just as insightful, whatever, who just didn't happen to be in the right places. But the more important thing is being poor, or even being working class in today's America, is very hard. You say, why don't you just try harder? Think about how difficult it is. Think about how hard it is if you don't have health insurance when one of your kids gets sick. Think about how little room for error, how much attention you have to give to just trying to manage the ordinary things in life. Think about the fact that you really, in this environment now, you cannot get your kids you can't afford to send them to a good school or maybe to college at all, no matter how hard you try, no matter how hard you skimp and save. So there's lots of evidence on this. It really is. It's overwhelmingly clear that if you look at underlying talent, even at academic achievement, that a dumb rich kid is more likely to graduate college and have a successful career than a smart poor kid. So the idea that it's all about the individual is just wrong. It's just not true.
So Obamacare. We're headed back to the Supreme Court. You read the headlines, it sounds like there might be a credible legal challenge. You say the whole thing's ridiculous. What's going on?
Ridiculous. Every lawyer who isn't essentially a paid flack says it's ridiculous. It's the most, everything about the bill is saying that the idea that Congress wrote a law that was designed to collapse in any state that chose to not run its own exchange, even though the law made a provision for the federal exchange. It's ridiculous, which of course doesn't mean that it won't prevail. Now, if it happens, it's going to be interesting, because then you'll have a situation where Republican-led states will face intense pressure to do what's necessary to keep getting those subsidies. I mean, and we're not just talking about the Deep South, right? New Jersey did not, because of Christie, New Jersey does not have its own exchange. New Jersey is using the federal exchange. Is the governor of New Jersey really going to be in a position to allow hundreds of thousands of people in New Jersey who've gotten health insurance to lose it because he refuses to do, as best we can tell, actually, it might be just establish a web domain that links you to the federal domain, and that might bypass this challenge. So he's going to really refuse to spend a couple of $100s on a web link to preserve health insurance for hundreds of thousands of people in New Jersey. I mean, there will be states where they'll do that. There will be states where the joy of depriving people of health insurance will overwhelm the overwhelming economic damage. But I think probably a number of states would make an adjustment.
So, politics. 2 years ago, everybody said Republican Party had so alienated itself with seemingly extreme ideas and shutting down the government and so many unpopular things. They were just marginalized forever. And we come back in the midterms, we have a shockingly pro-Republican result. Why is that? What happens in 2 years, 4 years, 6 years? The economy just keep waffling back and forth?
Everybody wants to know, and nobody actually knows. My line on all of these things is that political pundits, by and large, imagine that the ordinary American voter is like them and is sitting around and reading stories about politics and analyzing and saying, well, is Obama making sufficient efforts to reach out? And people don't know any of that. People are busy. People have lives. They have kids. They have 2 jobs. And so they have impressions. And those impressions are often not right, and they can be gamed. So how many people even know that Republicans control the House of Representatives? Lots of people don't. How many people knew what the filibuster is? Actually, I find a fair number of political pundits don't seem to quite understand that. So they look and they say, well, Obama's in the White House and the economy seems not so great, and there's Ebola, and one of my favorite political scientists, Larry Bartels, has pointed out that presidential approval ratings seem to go down when there are shark attacks, right? People just have things are not right with the world, I'm going to vote against the president. And so I think that's what happened, is the combination. Obstructionism meant that the economy was worse. There was some bad stuff. I mean, we may never know, but I would not be surprised if Ebola played an important role in this, because even though it makes no sense at all, people are thinking, well, Obama, poor leadership, there's this plague, and we're all going to turn to zombies, right? So it's and I've been writing newspaper columns now since 2000, which means that I've been through 2004 when it was a permanent Republican majority, and 2008 when it was a permanent Democratic majority, and 2010 where there's no way that Obama will be reelected. And so I'm kind of, something is going on, but I'm not sure I'm more willing to sort of roll with the punches than someone who's newer to this, I guess.
And so the old aphorism that people vote with their wallets, true?
People vote, not even sure. I mean, but people vote based on what they think is going to happen, and a lot of that is their wallets, though not entirely. 2004 was, at least partly, as people say, a khaki election. People were voting, as I like to say, they voted for Bush because they thought he would defend them against gay married terrorists. But it's something. But the question is, do people have a very good appreciation of what the different parties are proposing and what it would do to them? And the answer is no, not really. I mean, partly because the news media, by and large, are not still. They're a little better than I think they used to be, but not very. When Mitch McConnell said, "Oh, I'm against Obamacare, but of course we can keep the Kentucky Health Exchange, which obviously doesn't work without it." Was there really clear reporting to the people of Kentucky saying, "No, yeah, that's a lie, can't work"?
Well, in the media's defense and in the public's defense, just take economics. The fact that you can be in an entirely different school than half of your economics colleagues, and you're fighting and arguing, and you're all incredibly smart, and nobody can prove one way or the other, or as you've said many times, even when it is proven, you can't get the other side to admit that they're wrong. You can understand how in the media and in the public, people are sort of saying, I don't know who to believe.
Well, but this is, I mean, I did it long ago. 10 years ago, I did an exercise. I looked actually at healthcare. I looked at the major network and CNN, I think, coverage of the Bush versus Kerry healthcare plans at the time. And the question was, how many stories were there that explained the difference between what they were proposing on healthcare? And the answer was none, not one. There were a number of stories on how the healthcare plans were playing, but nowhere. If you had gotten if you've been watching the major networks and CNN, you would at no point have been told what the candidates were actually proposing. Maybe a little bit better now, but horse race. I have to say, I really hate horse race coverage.
As a media person, I will promise you that when we get into 2016, the heat, we will do exactly that. We will say, here's the difference in the health plans between this team and that team, and we'll make it clear. We'll send it to you and make sure you're okay with it.
That's right.
And then nobody will read it.
Oh, I know. And for that matter, I mean, I should have seen the midterm results coming when I looked at the most emailed list at the Times, which was tending increasingly to be dominated by food and health, right? People... all right.
They have their team, they root. Meanwhile, food and health.
Yeah, and look, I mean, at some level, people have lives, but it does matter. And so all I can do is keep on plugging.
What have you been wrong about? That over time you became, okay, I argued that, I really believed it, but it's wrong.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I have a list. I greatly underestimated the economic impact of IT. I didn't really, mid-90s, I was very skeptical about claims that we were about to have a productivity boom, and I was wrong, it came. I was really quite wrong about fiscal crises. If you go back to the early 2000s, I thought that the US could have a crisis, something like what eventually happened to Greece. And I have to say, it was one of those things I should have felt the warning signs, because I wasn't really able to write down a model. I just felt in my gut that we could have a fiscal crisis, and it's clear that I was wrong. And I should have gone with this is one time when I really should have gone with the analytics and not with my gut. I didn't see, I saw the housing bubble. I thought we were going to have a recession when the housing bubble burst, but I did not see the devastation. I did not pay enough attention to household debt and had no idea whatsoever about the fragility of the financial system. I thought the euro would fall apart. And not because I had the economics wrong, but because I underestimated the determination of the European elite to hold the thing together. So I wouldn't have believed that countries would suffer through what Greece or Portugal is suffering through and hang in there, but they will. And I underestimated Mario Draghi. Didn't realize now in the end he may not be able to hold it together, but he certainly made the effort. And so, no, I mean, I've had a few things where I've been wrong analytically, where I basically had the wrong framework, and I've changed. And
so you have changed the framework,
yes,
which is effectively what you seem to be asking the other school to do. It's just like, come on, guys, just admit it. Your framework's wrong. Change the framework. So you, throughout your life, have changed some things about your framework?
Oh, yeah. I mean, and some of them would be further back, and I was very skeptical of the idea of self-fulfilling currency crises. And I actually wrote a paper where I said, I concede. I was wrong. Maury Osfeld was right. They do happen. And so no, I mean, I think it's very, yeah. I mean, if you can't ever admit that you were wrong about something, then you're going to be in big trouble. And I try. If I am defending a position irrationally, I hope that people will tell me. And it's not. Yeah, if you never get something wrong, If you never turn, if events never refute your framework, then there's something wrong with you, because nobody is infallible, and so you better have. I mean, you should feel good about saying, okay, I got that one wrong.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks.